Okay, this example video is all about line of sight. This is a very key concept in the game, so make sure you understand how line of sight works. Line of sight is one of the requirements of having a legal target to fire upon. And the way you check that is draw straight lines between the attacker and the target. One thing that's going to help you do that is a line of sight tool, such as this tape measure. So I can easily draw a straight line between a center dot to a center dot. And that's what we're going to do here. I want to show you some examples of how line of sight works, how feature tiles can modify an open line of sight with restrictions providing concealment for units that occupy them or sit past them. And then we're also going to talk about some specific examples. And I'll show you with this particular setup how we check to see if units can actually fire upon each other in any given game. Now, units must have a clear line of sight to attack a target. Otherwise, the target is concealed. You determine line of sight with a straight line from the center dot to the center dot. And basically, the way this works is it's considered clear if nothing interferes, and it's considered blocked if something's in the way. Very simple. Now, how do you know if something's in the way? Well, what's going to obscure line of sight? There's a couple things. One key concept is a friendly unit can't fire past another friendly unit. So, for example, if I had these infantry here, I couldn't even fire past this other friendly unit of mine. That would block my line of sight. Now, if it's an enemy unit I was trying to fire past, that's no problem. I can fire past the enemy because I don't care if I accidentally hit the one I'm not targeting. So, friendly units block line of sight. What else can block line of sight? Feature tiles have very detailed artwork on them. And you can see these 4-inch square feature tiles basically show you right on the tile what blocks line of sight. So it says right here, walls block line of sight through. Well, what's a wall? Well, it's pretty obvious that this house has 4 walls, and if you were to draw a straight line across this tile, what this means is if you were drawing a line that passes over this tile, for example, from a place over here to a place over here, that straight line would be blocked once it hits the wall. So right there it's blocked. Right here it's open, 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 no problem. Of course, straight across the tile, it's pretty obvious. The house is going to block a clear line of sight from the west side to the east side. So what about units that occupy this house, for example? Well, are they protected? Yes, they're protected with an infinite defense, except feature tiles are sometimes destructible. So, for example, this house can be destroyed with bombs, large tank guns, rear line artillery, and if that happens, you flip the tile over and you have the ruined side of that house, which opens up line of sight. You'll notice this edge changed. So where the damage happened, the line of sight got opened up into that building. Alright, so basically you have 3 different ways that we highlight the edge of this feature tile, if it has any kind of blocking feature. So what you'll see is green highlighted edges, red highlighted edges, and sometimes unhighlighted edges. Okay, so those 3 types of edges are very key in the game. You ignore those edges if you're passing over, say, the yard of this house. You don't look at those edges. You only care about these highlighted edges if a unit is targeted within that tile or is firing from that tile, outward from that tile. So, let's look at this on the map. We have a German Panzerschreck team right here. They're occupying this church ruin. Okay, now how do I know where I can fire out of this ruin as the German player? Well, I look at my center dot and I trace a line to any particular target I want to check, and I can check that at any time. And if that line goes over the green highlighted edge, firing outward, what that means is that I can attack and I get concealment from that edge, from that green edge. So I'm firing out from that church, and I can do so in a concealed way. Now I can also fire out across the unhighlighted edge, which would not give me any concealment. In other words, I can be targeted directly right back. However, I would still get any defensive bonus of the ruins, in this case, a 3. So, ruins and intact feature tiles, those are all good things for infantry. It helps them survive and gain some cover throughout the game. Now, say that we wanted to fire at this Sherman tank. Okay, so what you do is you look at the attacker, in this case the Panzerschreck, and the defender, in this case the tank, the Sherman, and we're going to see if we have a clear line of sight. That's all we're checking right here. Alright, so we take our straight line tool. It can be a string, a tape measure, the edge of a book, whatever. And you see that firing out from the church, I do have a line of sight to the Sherman. I cross over a green highlighted edge, which is good for the Panzerschreck team because it means, something we'll get to in a minute, firing into this tile is restricted. In other words, there's not a clear line of sight in. So that is a clear line of sight, and as the German player I would probably want to mark that as a declared target. So use a paired targeting counter and I declare that I'm firing there. Now let's see if we've got line of sight with the Sherman to this other tank. So I'm kind of jumping around a bit, but what we're going to do is go ahead and declare the German attacks first, as if the Germans have initiative. Okay, so checking line of sight, we're going to move these two guys out of the way, and we see pretty clearly that there's a straight line with nothing in between to block. So we do have line of sight. As quickly as that, we've checked it. Now the Germans are deciding to fire the Panzer IV at the Sherman, and so we mark that with a paired targeting counter. Okay, now how about this 30 cal team? Can they do anything? Well, the 30 cal team is in another house, and that house has some edge highlighting on it. It's an intact building, which gives him some good defensive advantage. Until that building is destroyed, he's basically sitting in there under cover. And so the 30 cal and the sniper would like to fire at a target, but I don't see anything that's possible. Let me see. Let me double check. This house firing outward. I need to fire out through a green edge or an unhighlighted edge, but I have these red edges here. What do those red edges mean? The red edges mean I can't see out the corners of that building. So firing outward, if there was a target directly to the southeast, I couldn't see it because it's going through the corner of the building, firing out. So that's not going to work. However, my target is over here. I want to see if I can hit this rifle squad. So what we're going to do is move the guys out of the way here so we can see and do a check. And I take a straight line that I'm going to lay out so you can see it. And that straight line goes from the center dot of the attacker to the center dot of the target. So as you can see there, from the attacker all the way to the target, I have a clear line of sight. However, the 30 cal team is out of range. Remember, range is 5 for infantry. I'm at a range of 6 right now. The sniper is not out of range, so the sniper will have a target if he so chooses, right here on this this infantry unit. And I'm sorry, I'm jumping to the U.S. declaration, but I want to show you this key example here. If this line, which it does, if it passes over a feature tile, in this case, that has some blocking artwork, in this case walls, you have to make sure that this line isn't blocked by hitting one of these walls. And in this case we can see pretty clearly that it's blocked when it hits that wall. It's not blocked center to center of these two tiles. So we're okay. So if we were a little bit further down, like if the space was over here, we couldn't see the guy. and the church walls would block that line. So again, we're not looking at these edge highlighting colors if we're passing over the tile. We only look at that to and from a tile. Okay, so let's jump and go ahead and make that a U.S. declaration that the sniper will fire on this rifle squad. Now, rifle squad, if he wanted to fire back, he's out of range, but if he wanted to try and fire back, he couldn't do so because firing into this tile, a green or red highlighted edge blocks line of sight. Okay, so you can see that that intact building is a very good defensive position because there's no line of sight that will penetrate the building and allow direct targeting of that sniper. So what are your options as the German player? Well, the German player could, instead of firing at that Sherman, he could target the building. And you check that the gun is big enough to destroy it, and it is, and there's ways you can destroy these feature tiles and potentially damage the unit inside if you're successful. So you can try to take down the unit or the building instead of trying to target the unit inside of it itself. There's another video that's going to cover feature tile destruction, but for now I just want to mention that that is an option. Okay, so since we know that this 30 cal team is out of range to fire, we're going to see what else he can do. Well, I have a rear line artillery unit. I have a 105mm howitzer as a U.S. player, and he's sitting on the rear line over here. Rear line artillery need to have a line of sight from a spotter to a target on the front line. So in other words, they can't see the front line targets directly, so they rely on spotters to call in that artillery fire. And in this case, we're going to show you an example of that. This 30 cal LMG, out of range to any infantry and unable to affect this Panzer IV, will spot for the 105mm howitzer that is able to affect the Panzer IV. So we mark that he's spotting with one of these spotter counters. And we see that he has a line of sight because we're firing outward over a green, so he's concealed, and he's firing out, and he sees that Tiger, or I'm sorry, that Panzer IV. And so we mark the targeting counters on the howitzer itself to the target space. Now, artillery and mortar fire is area fire. That affects everything in that space. So if there was an infantry unit in that space as well, both units would potentially get damage from that artillery fire. Okay, so that's an example of spotting. Now, let's see what else he could have done. Now, he can see past this enemy tank into this ruin. So if you notice here, those house ruins, it has a unhighlighted edge on the west edge. That's unhighlighted, which means that the units inside, in this case the rifle squad, could be directly targeted. So firing out from a green edge past an enemy within range into the ruins of this tile is okay, and that rifle squad could be targeted direct. What's interesting is the rifle squad couldn't fire back because the intact building protects the sniper and the 30 cal. So that is the way line of sight basically works in the game. Now, again, firing outward across a green edge is okay to a straight line target. Firing outward across a red edge is blocked. It's not okay. Firing out or in through an unhighlighted edge is okay. So this damaged area reveals what's inside. Units can be targeted directly, but they still get any defensive bonus of the ruins or whatever the tile may provide. Now, if some of these tiles have no edge highlighting, which simply means that they don't block line of sight across, and if it doesn't tell you that it blocks line of sight across, then you're okay to see past whatever that feature might be. And along with that, typically, is when you occupy that space, it's not going to provide you with much concealment. You may get, in this case, a defensive bonus, not a whole lot of concealment. So now here, this is an interesting one. These crops are green all the way around, and they block line of sight in, because if you're firing in through a green or a red edge, you're blocked. So you can't see the infantry within those blocks, within those crops. And what's interesting too is across this tile, the crops block line of sight. So the whole tile is going to block any line drawn across it. So those are pretty much a big blocking, concealing feature. What's interesting about the crops though is if a tank enters them, they're destroyed. You remove them. So you can actually bring a tank right into the crops and take them down. Okay, so that is line of sight in a nutshell. There are a lot of different ways that we use those key concepts of highlighted edges in the game to really switch up these feature tiles. So for example, the cemetery has a lot of green but also a lot of unhighlighted. So the walls of the cemetery correspond with the green edges right here, and the unhighlighted portions correspond with the damage. That's basically how it works.